Today's focus will be on the differences between non-renewable and renewable resources. This should be pretty much reviewed for you. Okay, so what are non-renewable resources? Non-renewable resources are resources that are not being remade or regrown at a rate at which we are using them. We're using them at a faster rate than they are being created. Okay, so one example of a non-renewable resource is nuclear energy. Nuclear energy comes from using uranium, and uranium is a material that, or an element that once we use all of that element up, we cannot create it. Therefore, once uranium is all gone, we are done using nuclear energy. Therefore, it is non-renewable. The ones that you guys are probably most familiar with as far as non-renewable resources is coal, petroleum or oil, and gas. Okay, so all of these are considered non-renewable because it takes a long, millions of years to create them, and we're using them at a much faster rate than they are being created currently. These are also known as fossil fuels. The reason why they are known as fossil fuels is because they came from past living things. Okay, so now they are fossils, and we are using them as a source of energy or a fuel. So coal is actually made differently than natural gas and oil. Coal is made in swamps from plant materials. So coal is plants. Okay, so that is where we get our primary source from, we are getting our source from coal is from plants. Okay, and so long ago, plants then in these swampy areas where there's lots of vegetation, they died, they got compressed, put under a lot of pressure and heat, and therefore turned into coal. This is different than oil and natural gas. Oil and natural gas actually came from the oceans, and what happened is these animals died, and then they, under pressure and heat, turned into oil and natural gas. So oil and natural gas come from animals, whereas coal comes from plants. Okay, oil and natural gas came from oceans, and coal came from what we would determine as being swamps. Okay, so we've got our non-renewable resources of uranium or nuclear, coal, natural gas, and oil. So what are some renewable resources? Well, renewable resources can be replenished in a short period of time. The 5 that we're going to be talking about is solar, wind, water, geothermal, and biomass. So what is solar as far as renewable resource? Well, it's energy that comes from the sun. Why is energy from the sun renewable? Because every day we have sunshine. All we have to do is wait until night passes and we will get sun again. So solar is always going to be a resource that we can utilize. Geothermal, what is geothermal? Geothermal is energy that comes from the Earth's heat. Okay, it is renewable because the Earth is constantly releasing heat. The only problem with geothermal is that we will have to have access where it's pretty close to the surface to where we can get access to this source of energy, which is not every location. Wind, this is probably a very much of a duh as far as where wind energy comes from. Well, it's energy that comes from the wind. Why is energy from the wind renewable? Because we constantly have high and low pressure systems caused by the uneven heating of the earth. And so wind is a constant that we have here, and so therefore it is renewable. Biomass, as far as a renewable resource, is anything from organic or living materials. So if you cut down a tree, you burn it, that's considered a source of energy, and that is biomass. Okay, but it was burning of organic or living material. Why is it considered renewable? Because all you have to do is replant the plants, and you've got your source of energy again. Water or hydroelectric is energy that comes from the flow of water. Why is energy of the flow of water renewable? Because we have this thing called the water cycle where we constantly have water continuously moving through and flowing, okay? Whether it's going up into the clouds and then down through a mountain, through precipitation, and then through a river. We're constantly having this flow of water due to the water cycle, so therefore it is renewable. Okay, so let's place these renewable, these sources of energy down at the bottom. Oil, coal, burning wood, hydropower, geothermal, solar, natural gas, wind energy, nuclear energy, and biomass into whether it is renewable or non-renewable. Why don't you pause this now and fill it in. All right, so let's go through where they're located. So oil would be non-renewable, coal would be non-renewable, burning wood would be renewable. Hydropower is considered renewable. Geothermal is considered renewable. Solar, renewable. Natural gas, non-renewable. Wind energy, renewable. nuclear energy, non-renewable, and biomass, renewable. So what is this impact on the charts? What does this chart show that we're looking at? So first off, I see that it is total consumption. So this is energy usage. And he uses this unit of British thermal units. It really doesn't matter. You're just kind of looking at the numbers when we're looking at this. So when I look at this, what I want you guys to note is that we look at United States. So United States uses 101.6 BTUs, whereas China, who we all know has a much greater population, only uses 77.8 BTUs. Okay, and so what that shows is that the United States, even though they have less of a population, they use a lot more energy. Why is that? Well, we are a more developed country, therefore we use more electronics, we travel more with our gas, we fly more, things like that. We have more money, therefore we can spend it, and when we spend it, a lot of times we'll use it on using up energy. China, on the other hand, tends to be a more poor country, and therefore they use less of it. If you look at India, who has also a really, really large population, only uses 19.1 BTUs. Therefore, you can understand that once again, you can kind of assume that either they have a lower population than the United States, or that they tend to not be as what we consider developed, and so they don't use those energy resources as much. So what is this impact? What does this chart show? Well, what this chart shows is that we're comparing our BTUs, so how much BTUs, how much energy is being used, and here are our years. And what you should really note is that obviously it's increasing. So why does it increase the world demand? Well, you got to think about two major reasons. Number one, our population is always growing, so therefore our energy use is being used more. Number two, we are also using more energy for our daily lives, such as electronics, cars, transportation, everything like that. We are increasing our demand across the world, and therefore our amount of energy that we are utilizing also increases. If we want to compare the world usage versus the United States, so this is the United States and where we get our energy sources. The one on the left is where the world, so everybody else, uses. What I want you to note is that obviously we are very oil driven. Okay, comparatively, that's 39% to 33%, not too significant. But what I really like to note is the renewable of the differences. So renewable across the world is 18%. Renewable in the United States is only at 8%. And that is changing. This is from a longer time ago. It was 2007. So it is a longer time. We are definitely increasing our renewable. But what I also find interesting is actually this biomass usage. The biomass is 11%, whereas in the United States it is 4%. And why do you think there's that big difference between the biomass used around the world, which remember is plants and trees and things like that, that's their source of energy, versus us using it only 4% of the time? The reason that I feel that it would be is because that a lot of the countries other than the United States are not as developed, and their main source of energy is from biomass, which is either they're using trees, they're burning their fields, or they're actually using human and animal waste to make their source of energy and burn that. So that's probably where that differentiation comes between the 11% and the 4%. If we were to compare to the same equally developed nations, such as let's say England, my guess is that their biomass would be about equivalent to what ours is. All right, so let's compare how Illinois compares to the rest of the United States. Now, first, what I want you to understand is when we look at the pie chart on the right-hand side, which is Illinois, do not look at the 13. That is not its percentages, okay? So do not look at the percentages, but what you should look at is more of like the pie chart and try to get a guesstimate. So what I want to note is a few things. First off, if you look at the United States, uranium is used 8.5% of the time across the entire United States. If we look at nuclear, which is the red one in the pie chart, to me it looks about, I don't know, I would say about 25% of the time. And so obviously we are a very nuclear driven state. What I also want to note is that when we look at, let's say, coal, okay, so coal on the United States is about 18%. When I look at coal in Illinois, it looks about, I don't know, I'd say 33%, something like that. So obviously we are both driven by coal and nuclear power compared to the rest of the United States.